In the many records that would come to be written on the Crieff War, the Avenger-class Grand Cruiser remained a powerful force in the Imperium's defense until its eventual destruction. Admittedly, the storming of its bridge was the blow that crippled the ship, leaving it robbed of its former effectiveness, but it continued to fight with all honor. History can be a humorous thing indeed, when written by the losers. Curiously absent from the Imperial records documenting the battle was that the sword spent its final half hour of life in relative indignity, robbed of its glorious fury and its expected honorable last stand. Instead, it unleashed its reduced rage, directionless and limping, while it was systematically torn apart by the War Master's cruisers, among them the Covenant of Blood, which was not shy about opening fire on a vessel even while its own Astartes were on board. A swift and decisive victory demanded no less. Hello my friends, and welcome back to another video. In this video, I'll be going over the events of when an elite squad of only 4 traitor Astartes brought down an entire 25,000 manned Avenger-class Grand Cruiser, the Sword of the God Emperor. Before we continue, I humbly ask that if you enjoy the video, please don't forget to give it a like. Subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and sharing goes a long way in supporting the channel and its future growth. If you really like what I do, feel free to consider supporting me by contributing to my Patreon, or clicking that join button on YouTube. Any and all support is massively appreciated and is a huge motivation for me to keep making these videos and improving on the production value. So, without further ado, let us begin. Now, I should pretense this by stating it wasn't purely just one squad of Astartes that took down the battlecruiser, though in the playing out of events it is nearly entirely the legwork of these 4 Space Marines. The squad in question comprises of 4 members during this engagement. Talos, the leader of the squad and somewhat of a spiritual successor to their Primarch Conrad Curse, having been cursed with his own random visions of prophecy. He's also been walking around with a Blood Angel's power sword relic named Urim. Not sure if I'm saying that right, but if it means something to you, feel free to mention it in the comments down below. Talos having this sword is somewhat of a source of great annoyance for the Loyalist Legion. Syrian. His main role within the group is that of comic relief, though, jokes aside, he is possessed of a ruthless intellect, which leads to a fair number of nonchalant comments coming from the warrior as he butchers his way through the unlucky many that get in his way, a reflection of his thoughts on those beneath him and their futile lives as mortals. Speaking of butchering, up next is Uzis. Uzis' personality can mostly be described as a goddamn menace and not the kind of battle brother you want helping out in your kitchen. He is the cause for a considerable amount of headaches for Talos, and though he was a well-respected sergeant at one point, his bloodthirsty commitment to Khorne has made him even more of a liability than a boon for the First Claws. And lastly, Zal. Zal actually grew up alongside Talos on Nostromo, being close friends and even being inducted into the Nightlords together. Zal is a very capable warrior, methodical in his approach and the voice of reason within the team. His commitment to his chapter is without question, and he believes that order within the galaxy should be enforced and maintained with fear, much like his father before him. The assault by the First Claws of the Nightlords began with their ship, the Covenant of Blood, breaking into real space during an active orbital engagement over the Crieff cluster. Abaddon the Despoiler had marked these worlds as his next prize, and the Nightlords followed eagerly behind. The Covenant of Blood, commanded by the Exalted, the former Nightlord captain Vandrad and Raffi, made an immediate beeline for the center of the battle. With the War Master watching and the Exalted eager to impress, the demon-possessed Nightlord marked 2 ships as their prey. With some harsh yet artful maneuvering, the Nightlord's ship was able to infect its first target, the Resolute, without them even knowing what hit them. The next ship in the hunter's eyes was the Sword of the God Emperor. This time, 3 traitor ships would come to assist the Covenant of Blood. The Blade of Flame, the Ironmonger, and none other than the Vengeful Spirit itself. In a coordinated strike, the combined might of these 4 ships brought down the shields of the enormous flagship within seconds, though the effects of this brutal assault would only be enough to bring down the shields for a short amount of time. Yet, once again, this was all for the purpose of a larger goal, for the Nightlords had landed a hidden blow that would poison the mighty vessel from within. When they had first come aboard, Talos had disembarked from the twisted wreckage of the hull where the pod had impacted, Arum in one hand, Anathema gripped in the other. Despite 10 minutes of infrequent fighting since then, he'd barely fired his bolter once. The same with Syrian or Zal. The squad was conserving its ammunition for when it really counted. Once they reached the bridge, their pod had struck the enemy ship in the densely populated upper gunnery decks, and the resulting slaughter was a time-consuming annoyance that had grated on all their nerves. Except Uzus. Uzus had loved every moment of ploughing through the terrified crew as they put up what defences they could with tools and personal sidearms. The bark of his bolter was like a hammering in Talos's head, unwelcome and aggravating. At one point, Talos had slammed his brother against the arching wall of one passageway. Under fire from a retreating rabble of gunners ahead, he had thudded Uzus's helm against the metal wall and snarled through his speaker grill. "You are wasting ammunition. Control yourself." Uzus writhed out of his brother's grip. "Prey! They are unworthy prey. Use your blades. Focus. Prey! They are all prey." Talos's fist cannoned into the other Nightlord's face, denting his helm's faceplate. It slammed his head back into the wall a second time, louder than gunfire. From the cluster of mortal crew at the end of the passageway, a solid round clanged from Talos's shoulder guard. He ignored it, blinking to clear his visor's display of the flashing warning runes. "Control yourself, or I will end you here and now." "Yes," Uzus said, finally. "Yes, control." He reached for his fallen bolter. Talos could see the reluctance in his brother's movements as Uzus clamped the weapon to his thigh plate and drew a chainsword. Unsurprisingly, the Khornite Berserker's blood frenzy would quickly resurface, continuing to loose bolt round after bolt round into lobotomized servitors that had been left to continue their endless work. After a few run-ins with the ship's onboard defenders, effective only enough to slow down Talos and his first claws, the squad of traitors finally arrived at the massive adamantium doors that barred their way to the ship's bridge. After a few quick suggestions on how to get through these doors, they came down to the perfectly logical conclusion of Talos repeatedly hitting the door with the Blood Angel's prized relic. Though that isn't entirely true. Yes, the idea of explosives and chainswords had been floated around as a solution, yet alone would have taken far too long. Together though, that was what Talos had in mind. After repeatedly slashing his way as far through the thick adamantium bulkhead as necessary, the Nightlords proceeded to place explosives within the door, resulting in the barrier to their prize being blown wide open, leaving the contents inside staring in horror at the monsters who clawed their way in. A figure emerged, blacker than the shadows from which it stalked. Vif took in the sight. A towering killer, too large in all ways to be considered human, clad in bulky ceramite plate forged in a forgotten era. He drank in the details within the space of a single heartbeat. In one hand was a blade of gold as long as Vif was tall, sparking with lethal power and dripping molten metal from the door it had sliced through. In the other fist, an oversized bolter with a wide muzzle, open like the maw of some great beast. Its helmed visage was painted with a skull's staring face, bone white over midnight blue, with glaring red eye lenses lit up from within. A scroll, tattered and burn-marked by small arms fire, was draped across its left shoulder, the surface of the creamy paper covered in runes alien to Vif's eyes. On the other shoulder, a clutch of short chains hung from the ceramite, bronzed skulls hanging from the dark iron links like morbid fruit, rattling as the figure moved. Talos's retinas were bombarded with chiming runes flickering across his visor, target upon target upon target, detailing the white flashes where weapons were visible. A single step into the chamber, he didn't raise his weapons, nor did he seek cover. As soon as he emerged from the broken doorway, he threw his head back, blanking his visor of all the threat runes, and he screamed. It was a roar no unaugmented human could ever make, as resonant and primal as a feral world reptilian carnosaur. The roar, already inhumanly loud, was amplified by the vox speaker in Talos's helm to deafening levels. Powered as it was by his 3 lungs, the cry stretched out for almost 15 seconds at full strength, echoing through the corridors of the sword in a flood of sound. The crewmen plugged into their consoles felt it physically, sending tremors through the vessel's steel bones. Across the ship, tech priests and servitors linked to the ship's system felt the machine spirit soul of the sword shiver in response to the unearthly roar. On the bridge, Lord Admiral Valiant's Arventor, at one with the ship's machine spirit in a way infinitely more intimate than any other, began to cry blood. The Imperials would spend their last few moments either gripped in an overwhelming terror as the lives of their comrades were snuffed out one after another, or screaming for the Emperor in a vain attempt to hold on to their courage, despite knowing full well the final moments of their lives would not be ones of peace and ease. With the entirety of the bridge crew now comfortably settled into their roles as the Nightlord's idea of interior design, Talos spared a few moments of curiosity to question the Lord Admiral over his faith, before slowly sliding the power sword Arum into his malformed body. And with that final act, their objective was complete. The poison had met its mark. For the Admiral had been infused with the vessel he oversees. His physical form was bound to the command throne, his lower body replaced by a network of cables and tendrils. These connections served not only to physically anchor him to the ship, but also to merge his consciousness with the ship's machine spirit. This integration made him an essential part of the vessel, enhancing his command through direct connection. It was here in these 2 insane chapters this book really came alive for me. Talos has been slowly getting built up as an anti-hero of sorts, and during this exchange he almost sounds pitying. He wasted that second, and then, gripped by curiosity, he wasted another by asking, "Why would you do this to yourself, mortal?" He never got an answer. The Admiral's unshaven chin trembled as he tried to speak. "God, Emperor," the old man whispered. Talos ignited his power blade again, shaking his head. "I saw your Emperor a handful of times, back in the age before he betrayed us all. And," the Nightlord said to the dying man, "he was no god. Perhaps not a man," the Astartes smiled, "but never a god.
Never a god, Talos repeated gently. Know that truth as you die.
Talos genuinely feels betrayed by the Emperor, a tool to be abandoned, discarded once used. And here, before him, is a man who so zealously grips onto his faith in the God Emperor, to go so far as to bind himself to this battleship for eternity, that Talos was maybe hoping for some more profound response, something other than blind religious zeal. It just felt like such an honest response to me from Talos. He has seen the Emperor in person. He remembers what the Imperium was before the heresy. The Admiral, on the other hand, wasn't even close to being alive during that time, yet had gone to such lengths to pursue his faith. If someone would go so far, maybe they'd have an answer for him. But nothing, just the same empty words from another cog in the Imperium. I really hope this isn't just a runaway thought I had, and as I continue with this story, I hope more moments like this will occur. Anyway, moving on. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, First Claw wasn't alone. Second and Sixth Claws had also taken part in making sure this mission was a success. Their role was to take hold of one of the engine rooms and secure it against the ship's defending forces. When the time came, and the countdown timers for the explosives they had lined the hole with ended, they were already gone in their pods, and the ship's beating heart would slow to a stop. First Claw, on the other hand, weren't so lucky in their escape. Their pods were far from their end location, and making their way back through a ship filled with panicking crew was a drain on time they didn't have. It does, however, lead to one of the funniest and somewhat dark moments that 40k has to offer.
They'd met a flood of Imperial crew coming their way, which at first had been a surprise and had quickly become an annoyance. As they'd butchered the mortals running at them in the low-ceilinged corridor, Zal had joked that it was amusing to see humans running toward them for a change.
Makes the hunt all that easier,
he smiled.
You say that,
Syrian replied.
but you'd have to wonder what they're running from if we're a more pleasant option.
Zal reached for a running female officer, grabbing her by the throat to drag her into a headbutt that caved in the front of her skull and snapped her spine. He hurled the body into the oncoming horde, knocking several people over from their feet to be trampled by the advancing Astartes. Her blood was smeared across Zal's helm, starkly dark against the white skull of his painted faceplate.
I see your point, brother,
he said to Syrian.
The casual nature of how these guys treat their enemies is just so fun to read. It really helps with the understanding that these Astartes really do see themselves as above others. Standard humans are annoyances and nothing more, barely a threat, yet at the same time can still bring moments of joy by simply giving them a good old-fashioned reinforced headbutt. And in the world they live in, I'm glad war machines can find some moments of levity in these grim, dark times. There is another moment that follows this that is so goddamn funny that I just didn't think I could do it justice on here. So if this video has piqued your curiosity, then definitely give this book a read. And if you do, let me know if you find that scene as entertaining as I did. The First Claw's escape would involve some very coordinated teamwork and trust. In unison with the Exalted on the Covenant of Blood, and Septimus, the slave of Talos, who was piloting a Thunderhawk towards their rescue, the Nightlords were able to literally, and I do mean literally, shoot their way out of the dying battlecruiser and be jettisoned into the void. Free from the corpse of the once great ship, the now drifting Astartes were able to be collected by Septimus in the Thunderhawk, bringing them back to the dark diminishing halls of the Covenant of Blood. Thank you everyone for watching this video. I'm trying to expand my reading into the realm of chaos a bit more, and the Nightlords Omnibus was recommended to me by a friend a good while ago. I'm having an amazing time reading it and highly recommend giving it a shot for those who haven't. It's one of the more popular books I'm told, and I can already see why. I'm actually a little surprised I managed to get another video out before the move to Canada, but I just couldn't stop myself from making this one. It's a different kind of video for me, sure, but if you guys like it, you know what to do. Click that like button. If you want to see more, subscribe and click that bell button to keep up to date on new videos. And feel free to share this video to anyone you think would enjoy it. Interactions like these massively support the growth of the channel, and generally gives me an extra push into trying new things and trying to improve the experience I can provide through these videos.
Let's feed the algorithm gods.
If you really like this video and want to show your support, you can donate to my Patreon or click that join button on YouTube. These options are purely there for those who are interested. I know this channel isn't big, but I never expected even a single person to watch one of my videos, let alone having over 1,500 people think that what I make is worth their time. So, once again, thank you all for watching, my friends, and ta for now.